So for round 1, I always go with Hooves of Steel for any Immortal build. And this is because I see a lot of people make Immortal Orisa builds, and a lot of people will say to get Restortify first, which I just think is incorrect. You start with 500 max HP, and Restortify only heals for 5% of your max life every 1 second, and 5% of 500 is, hold on, 25. It's only 25 health per second, and Fortify lasts, I believe, 6 seconds on base. So that's 6 times 25 is 150 health. That's really not a lot in the grand scheme of things, and genuinely, if you soak up like a normal amount of damage with Hooves of Steel, you actually make more than that in shields if you're using it like to brawl. But that's just my opinion, I guess. I also think the fact that the shields, you know, you can it's like over health, but that can be healed back, just makes it way stronger than Restortify, especially in round 1. For the items, Armored Vest, I always get it. Compensator, and I get Weapon Grease now. They're just greens. They're not really that important. I like Armored Vest a lot, just for that extra damage reduction, you know, just that extra 25 health. And then Compensator and Weapon Grace are pretty self-explanatory. I don't usually love Weapon Grace on Orisa because that helps you overheat faster. But honestly, I used to get Plasma Converter, but the life steal is just not that much, man. For round 2, I always buy Mecha Z Series and Crusader Hydraulics, because Mecha Z Series, much like Rustang von Wilhelm, both scale with Hooves of Steel in the sense that any amount of shields gained used Hooves of Steel is also increased by Mecha Z Series, and its epic rarity version, Rustang von Wilhelm. Furthermore, it's also just kind of pretty much a 16% health increase just in general, like without Hooves of Steel, so it works great on Orisa. Furthermore, I think I already said furthermore, whatever. Crusader Hydraulics is just more damage reduction, which is just, that's the whole point of this build. For round 3, now we buy Restortify. I honestly still don't think it's that good of a power, even in round 3, but it has saved me before, I will say that much, and I think it's still worth using as of now, especially because you can't really get something like Martian Mender by round 3 realistically and still make your build work. So we're still buying Restortify, of course. For the items, we're going to get Efi's Theorem. For obvious reasons, it gives you more time to soak up damage for Hooves of Steel, and it gives you more of a heal through Restortify. Solar Regenergy, because you're using Crusader Hydraulics, this allows you to get that extra 10% damage reduction from Crusader Hydraulics on command whenever you use an ability, on top of course, the already basic amount of damage reduction that armor has. For round 4, as mentioned, we're getting Rustung von Wilhelm. That's it. That's all we're getting this round. It scales with Hooves of Steel. It increases the amount gained if you're also using Mecha Z series from Hooves of Steel by 23%, which is a very, very noticeable amount in practice. And this is what helps you get up to really absurd max HP numbers. For round 5, we're going to take Centripetal Charge as our power. I also would sometimes take Lassoed here if I also want to flex into building weapon power, that is. But just for the purposes of demonstration, I'm going with Centripetal Charge, which now allows me to use my ult as a panic button, which lets me regain my regen and my other cooldowns with Solar Regenergy and Restortify, of course. And for the items, we're getting Martian Mender, which basically gives us just constant Restortify healing. This is kind of better than Restortify in some cases, or at the very least on par, because it's 3% every 1 second, which when we're dealing with over 1,000 max HP, 3% is that's 30 health per second, so that is genuinely more than just, you know, base, like, raw Restortify is. So Martian Mender is, of course, just very strong for this build. It is not uncommon with this build to see you having more healing done than even any of the supports in the match. That's just going to happen. For round 6, we're buying Ogundamu Reduction Field, and we're selling Solar Regenergy. Ogundamu Reduction Field kind of just scales with Martian Mender, in the sense that the less damage they're dealing to you and the more that I'm healing means effectively they're dealing less damage to me. That makes sense. That's how that works. This is also a fine time to let go of Solar Regenergy, again because we have Martian Mender. We don't really need to rely on the extra damage reduction. I mean, not the extra damage reduction, the extra healing that we get from Solar Regenergy. Similarly though, Ogundamu Reduction Field also means we rely less on Crusader Hydraulics' 10% damage reduction. For the final round in this demonstration here, I bought Spin to Win. This is because it works incredibly well with Centripetal Charge. Spin to Win is kind of an odd power in the sense that even when people know how to play against it, or how to ignore it, or just like calling it out, it still manages to get you some ultimate charge rather quickly, and this just lets you get your ult charge back faster, which means you get your fortify back faster, and that just means you die less or never. That can happen a lot. Although honestly, I don't genuinely have that many games that go to round 7 at this point. I like to buy Nebula Conduit for my items here because it just reduces the damage that I take more. Also, there is a cap on the amount of damage reduction that you can have at any given point. I believe it is 50%. But the thing about Nebula Conduit, there's also another item, I can't remember which one it is. But the thing about Nebula Conduit is that its damage reduction doesn't actually count as damage reduction. So you can go over 50% damage reduction if you're using Nebula Conduit to 65% if you're fortified with 10% from 10 stacks of O Gundamu and Nebula Conduit. You can go over the max amount of damage reduction, which is, I don't know, kind of game breaking in my opinion.